Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. Okay, so I watched Joe Rogan's interview with Elon Musk, and I had some thoughts, responses that I wanted to put into video form. One of them is that I've been reading Crazy Days and Nights for a while now, and not a real long time, but I don't know, maybe a couple months or something. And I've noticed recently there have been at least a few blinds about Tesla and or Elon Musk, right? Like, I think it's either Tesla or SpaceX or one of his companies is having major problems. I think it's Tesla. Behind the scenes, this is like gossip or whatever. And like he's under massive stress, and I think he might have even done some illegal shenanigans to try to keep the company from going under or something. So, and like they did one about how he's, like going off to do gambling in Vegas or whatever. And so he made some crazy statement about maybe taking it private recently, which he had to walk back or change his mind on or whatever, because it made no sense. Peter Schiff was talking about how it made no sense what he was suggesting, like, taking it private, but like keeping all the little private shareholders still shareholders. Which it's like, why would you do that? Or if that's even possible, like, why wouldn't you just keep it public? It made no sense, right? So, and even in one point during the interview with Joe Rogan, he looked like he was on the verge of crying. He really did. I can't remember what it was when he was talking about. It might have been when he was talking about the environment and stuff, right? About how we're putting all the CO2 into the air and the water and all this, and it's really bad, right? How fossil fuels are really dangerous. If I'm right about him almost crying, and if he was... if that's when it was in the interview and he was talking about that, I can't remember for sure. It's probably because, like, he feels a lot of pressure, like, right? He's under a lot of pressure because of, his businesses, trying to keep them afloat. He even said, we already knew this, but, he said, I think he said this before, that, his Tesla almost went under in 2008, I think it was. Almost went bankrupt then. So I think he's under tremendous pressure. He even said in the Joe Rogan interview that oh goddamn, what was I gonna say? That he's that he's not a businessman, right? Like that he's not like a CEO type of person. Like he said, people think of him as being that kind of person, right? But he's not really. He said like 80% of his work is like engineering type of stuff, right? So he's like the technical guy. He's the guy creating the plans for the things and doing the technical work and the math and shit like that, right? He's not the guy sitting up in the penthouse and making decisions and allocating, this guy should do this and this guy should do this, and he's, dealing with the money and finances and shareholders and shit like that all day long, or whatever CEOs do. I don't know. He's down in the nitty gritty, unlike most CEOs, right? So I'm sure CEOs have to know the nitty gritty stuff too, to a degree, right? But not to the degree that Elon Musk does, because he's the genius behind all this stuff. He's the one who created the companies. He's not just some CEO that's experienced at running businesses. He's the CEO who created the business because he had a good idea, and he has the brains to think that the good idea is actually feasible in the real world, according to the math or the physics or the whatever, right? So he's trying to make the world a better place, right? He wants to get to the future where, we are colonizing other planets and stuff, which is what he said in the near the end of the interview, right, with Joe Rogan. So he is one of these people who's, I'm not saying even if he did some financial shenanigans to try to keep his company from going under, I don't see him as a bad person because of that. Because from what he didn't really make this. He maybe alluded to it a little bit, but he wasn't really clear on it. Maybe that's because he's a decorous person or he knows how to play the politics. I don't know. But, you probably don't want to piss the politicians off. So all he said was that he wishes that or maybe Joe Rogan suggested it or asked, and Elon Musk agreed with it. But one of them said something, and then Elon Musk said, yeah, politicians are not so good at, science. And it's a problem or whatever, basically, right? And this is true. Although he then went on to say that the Chinese are not so much that way. Quite a few of the Chinese politicians are really good at math or physics or whatever. He mentioned the mayor of Shanghai is really smart. He said he's met him. He's met that Chinese guy, and he said the mayor of some other Chinese city has like a physics degree. He talked about some other Chinese politician who has some biochemistry degree or something like that. So like he said, like the Chinese tend to be a lot more smart. They're politicians, but American politicians, no, they're typically not scientists. They're not even scientifically educated, right? So of course America's going to be corrupt and be foolish and not realize that science is the way forward. And if America is not putting almost all of its energy into science instead of war, which we're putting most of our energy and time and money and all the rest of it, blood and all the rest of it into, if we were putting all that time, energy, money, effort, and blood and all the rest of it into science, we would be skyrocketing forward. We would be we'd be pulling ahead of everybody, or at the very least, we'd be keeping pace with China, right? Like it wouldn't be a case where China's already beaten us, which they have financially through all their buying of gold. They have, 20, 30,000 tons of gold, maybe more. We don't really know for sure. They claim to have 1,800 tons, but that's a total lie. We know they have way, 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 way more than that. They mine, someone said like 300 tons, I think it was Rob Kirby or somebody, but I thought they mined 700 tons a year, China. But whatever it is, they mine like at least a few hundred tons of gold every year, and they keep it all. They don't. It's not allowed for export, for selling. So all the gold that is mined within China is kept, right? And then they buy more from America and other countries around the world, and so they import a bunch of gold, right? So they get tons of gold. They've already economically checkmated us, and they're placing a huge emphasis on science, right? So this is how they're going to pull way ahead of the whole rest of the world. Other than maybe other smart countries, like maybe Russia is going to be smart because they're an ally of China. Maybe they'll focus on science also. Maybe they'll be able to, be lieutenant of China going forward. But yeah, so I think perhaps Elon Musk is a little frustrated with the fact that the politicians are so scientifically ignorant, backward. They don't seem very, motivated to get America on a sustainable course in that, so that America could be getting off of oil and getting onto sustainable energy, solar and stuff. Elon Musk did say in the interview that, solar is like, the way forward or something like that. He said basically like, we have to get off of oil. This is crazy what we're doing, putting all this carbon into the air and the water and stuff like this. He said we need to get sustainable energy. Basically, he sees it like we're like, it seems to me, from what I gathered from the interview with Joe Rogan, is that Elon Musk sees the importance of getting on sustainable energy and not just getting on sustainable energy, but he sees that like we are behind. Like if humanity is going to survive, we have to do it. We have to get onto solar energy quick, right? And we are running out of time, and the pace at which we are doing this innovation to get onto solar energy is too slow. Like, we are in danger. If we do not speed up the pace of technological development, get our priorities in the right place, humanity is probably going to go extinct. Or we're going to have a massive crash, society will utterly collapse, and then, all over the planet, and then who knows what happens after that. All the power plants will probably melt down. They didn't mention that in the interview. I don't know why they didn't mention that. They should have mentioned that, I think. They also, another thing one of the things I want to make this video is, Joe Rogan said one of the few dreams that he has had in his life that he's had more than once is a dream where there were like 1 million Nikola Teslas or something like that, right? And how weird the world was. It was like the early 1900s, and yet it was super scientifically advanced, like it is today, right? Or more advanced. And Elon Musk didn't really respond to that too much. I mean, he did say either then or earlier that like he thinks it would be weird, like a lot of people would not like to be him. Like either alluding to the pressures that he's under financially or scientifically or whatever, or also just the fact that he said it's like to be him is like constant explosion, right? And that's how it is. Sometimes I feel like that, especially like when I've been practicing NoFap for a while or something. It's like I just get ideas too fast. Like I'll get an idea and then or an insight or something, and then I'll, like if I take a break, I'm like, okay, done with that idea, awesome. 5-10 minutes later, I get another, I'm like, God damn, now I got to write this one down or make a video about this or whatever. And then it's like, I'm like, okay, I'm done with that, finally, good. And then I sit down to relax, and then 5-10 minutes later, another idea. It's like, God damn it, another idea I got to do something with, right? It's like, I can understand exactly what he means. I remember there have been a few days where I went back when I wanted to be an author or something. I was just getting idea after idea after idea. It was so frustrating. I couldn't even write them down fast enough, right? So I know exactly I can extrapolate from what it must be like to be him, right? Like he probably gets ideas way quicker than I do, and he knows, and they're about science and stuff, so he knows how they could be scientifically implemented and made a reality, right? So he, or you know, what it must be like to be Laurel K. Hamilton or something. This author, she's really creative. It must be whether you're, you know, an author about, you know, totally unrealistic things, or whether you're a scientific person like Elon Musk, it doesn't matter. Like, some people just get ideas all the time. And I'm not saying I'm always like that, but I have been like that at certain points. And so I know what that's like, having that like constant explosion of getting new ideas all the time. It is annoying and it is frustrating because it's like you don't want to just let them be and do nothing with them. But on the other hand, you can't be like writing down your ideas all the time, or like even if you had a little you know, recorder to record like idea, you know, da 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 da, and then like you'd be doing that every 5 minutes. It'd be super super annoying. So I totally get what he's saying about like he doesn't think that a lot of people would actually like to be him. You know, it would be unpleasant to be him if, you know, and people would not actually want to be him if they had a choice. But on the other hand, you know, a lot of people would be rich. A lot of people absolutely hate their drudgery lives of working for minimum wage or whatever it is, right? Barely scraping by. So I think, you know, being super creative and having the frustration of that would be a small price to pay for being rich, right? But Elon Musk didn't basically say, he didn't like talk about the importance of this idea of what if there were a million Nikola Teslas or a million Elon Musks, right? Like, this is super important. This is why I'm constantly harping on genetics and IQ. This is why I'm constantly harping on, like, all you people out there who are super smart, you know? All you alt MGTOWs and Yan Lings and all you guys with really high IQs who are super smart. All of you guys, all you zeitgeist eaters, all you guys out there, you need to be giving your sperm to sperm banks. Even if it's like maybe you could go to another country and then, you know, live there, and then there's no misandric laws, then maybe, like, from what I've read, there's no danger if you go to a sperm bank and it's like anonymous. They choose the sperm anonymously, so they're not choosing your name, so they don't never get your name, so they can't sue you for custody. I mean, not custody, for child support, right? So if you're just giving your sperm anonymously, then a lot of people would choose it, you know, knowing that you have a 160 IQ or whatever, and then you'd be passing on your genes way more. You know, you might end up having 5, 10, 30 kids out there. And then now there's a bunch of little, you know, there's 30 zeitgeist eaters out there, and 30 alt MGTOWs out there, and 30 Yanlings out there. And then the world gets to be a way better place. You know, Elon Musk should be given sperm to sperm banks, you know, anonymously all the time, because then there would be a bunch of Elon Musks out there, and then the world would be advancing way, 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 way quicker scientifically. And then plus, the more people that are like that out there, the more they cohere with each other, the more they influence other people to cohere with them, and then it forms a movement. And then it's not like, oh, I'm just an individual who's super smart and can see rationality and is fighting the world and is fighting this losing battle. No, because then there's like hundreds of other people out there like you and or who are influenced by you, and then it's like you're an army. And then you can actually change the world, and then it's not frustrating. Like, Elon Musk probably thinks it's frustrating to be him because he has this really high IQ, and he can see the dangers of what we're facing, you know, environmentally and all the rest of it, running out of oil, not getting onto solar in time, etc. So he sees it like as an uphill battle, right? Like, he's fighting this losing battle, and it's really frustrating for him, right? Not just the frustration of always getting too many creative ideas, but also the frustration of having to fight this losing battle because the politicians are so stupid and backward and scientifically illiterate and so greedy and corrupt and all the rest of it, right? But he's fighting this losing battle, so it's frustrating for him, right? But, you know, it would not be so unpleasant to be him if there were 100 hymns, or 1,000 hymns, or 10,000 hymns. If there are 10,000 Elon Musks out there, they would all be making inventions that all, you know, interlock with each other, that are synergistic with each other, right? So he wouldn't have to choose between doing Tesla and SpaceX or whatever. Like, the other guy would be doing all those other ideas that he had that would, like, fit in with Tesla. Like, he could be doing just the chassis, and then another Elon Musk could be doing just the batteries, and another Elon Musk could be doing this aspect of SpaceX, and another Elon Musk could be doing this aspect of SpaceX, and another Elon Musk could be doing another business that interacts with SpaceX and or that interacts with, you know, Tesla or whatever, and then it all interlocks, and then it just charges forward and radically changes the world. And then they would be, you know, kicking ass and kicking the world's ass and massively advancing humanity instead of just trying to help humanity survive and be fighting this losing battle, right? So I think the burden would be greatly lifted off of Elon Musk if there were a hell of a lot more of him, a lot more people like him. So this points to the importance of passing on his genes as much as humanly possible. So all the people with, like, let's say IQs 140 and above should, and with really good memories as well, because, you know, having a really good IQ is almost meaningless if you don't have a really good memory also, right? I can attest to that. So, all these people with like 140 IQs or above should be giving their sperm to sperm banks as much as possible, so that there can be as many high IQ children as possible, so that we can advance quickly. But it's almost at a point where it's like too late, right? But so that's what because by the time they're 20 or 15 or whatever, and they're starting working and making the inventions and doing the businesses, it's like maybe humanity's already past the point of no return. We've run out of too much oil. Now we're screwed, right? So I don't know. Maybe it's almost too late, but you should still be doing it in case it's not too late. You should still be giving your sperm to sperm banks, right? And then another thing I wanted to respond to in response to what Elon Musk was saying in the video, Joe Rogan asked him about these Huawei phones or whatever. I guess they're like the number one producer of phones in the world, and Samsung's number two, and Apple is now number three, and Huawei, I guess, is these Chinese phones. And I don't know if it's the exact Chinese phones that I was thinking of, although I think it must be, which is that I read some article or heard about a little while ago, not that long ago or something, that these Chinese phones were going to be let into the U.S. to be sold to the U.S. consumers, but at the last minute, the U.S. government, forbid it. Like, they said, oh no, it's for national security reasons or whatever, you can't bring these phones, you can't sell these to U.S. customers. So, maybe the U.S. is right, maybe the U.S. is just being paranoid, but then again, this is the Chinese we're talking about, right? And probably almost all countries try to do this crap. So I'm sure the Chinese are just like the U.S., they put backdoors in everything, backdoors in hardware, secret operating systems, like Alt recently showed me a link to an article that talked about there being a Minix operating system in the hardware, I think it was, of all these chips or something so they actually put a mini operating system in there. So and apparently it's really insecure. So if you know about it, you could probably easily hack it and hack the CPU. No, I mean that seems to me to even be worse than a motherboard hack, right? Because if you don't know that your CPU is hacked, you'd have to get you might keep the CPU and put in a new motherboard, and now you're still hacked, right? So CIA, NSA, or whatever, they put backdoors in absolutely everything: the software, the hardware, everything, probably the firmware, everything, right? So I'm sure the Chinese are doing the exact same thing, putting backdoors in their hardware, firmware, and software, and probably everything else. If there is anything else, whatever else you want to call it. So they're probably creating cryptocurrencies with backdoors in them and whatever, right? So it's like hack the world. This is what governments are about, right? But of course, this makes everything insecure. This is really dangerous. Costs tons of productivity. It's really bad, right? We should be making everything secure so that we could play on a level playing field, rather than warring over insecure this and insecure that, and we're all trying to cheat each other. I mean that's inefficient. It's corrupt. It's stupid. It's wasteful. Everybody gets hacked, and then they got to buy a new computer, even though the old computer is just fine. It got hacked, so it had to be sold, and the new one bought. It's ridiculous how this is. With this whole putting backdoors and everything. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible idea that none of us should be tolerating. We should be assassinating these people. We should be taking over the fabrication plants. We should be, marching on AMD and Intel and executing the CEO and all the top guys there, and forcing all the low level guys who know about the backdoors to, show us the backdoors so that we can have real coders get rid of the backdoors. But anyway, he was saying, oh, these Huawei phones, nobody cares about your porn that you're watching, or nobody cares about what you're doing online, you, the average American citizen. So he was almost making that argument of with that terrible, terrible argument that's a very fascist, totalitarian argument, which is that if you have nothing to hide, then you have nothing to lose by letting the government, surveil you all the time. This is a terrible, terrible, terrible argument, because, it encourages self-censorship. And yes, that encourages restraint too, but it encourages tyranny as well, because then you give everybody self-censoring, and that's not good. So what I'm saying is, he was making a terrible argument there, Elon Musk was, and Joe Rogan seemed to be not really agreeing with him, but sort of capitulating, fatalistically accepting that, well, this is just kind of the way it is, right? Or he asked Elon Musk whether he thinks this is just kind of be the way it is going forward, right? Humans merge with machines, or humans sort of interact with artificial intelligence in some way, and we live sort of with intelligence at our beck and call as some kind of the way we do with our phones, and it's sort of an extension of ourselves. And he asked Elon Musk, do you think privacy is just going to completely disappear? And I can't remember what Elon Musk's response was, but basically I want to mention the Huawei thing. Elon Musk was basically saying like, "Oh, nobody cares about what you're looking at online or whatever," right? Like, but he was acting like it's no big deal. Like maybe if the Chinese do listen in on our Huawei phones or whatever, like, and then Elon Musk said, well, maybe like NSA employees or something like having Huawei phones might be a problem. He said like question mark there. And yes, that makes sense. Like you don't want to have like CIA employees, CIA agents, and NSA employees like having Huawei phones. If Huawei phones are listening to every word they're saying, and have backdoors in them and can read all their text messages and read everything that they go on everywhere they go online, every article they read online, right? Like that would be terrible, right, for national security, right? Not that I think that we should have a government or national security anyway, but we definitely shouldn't. But yes, that makes sense, right? Like, but I can't believe that Elon Musk is even only like saying that's only a question mark. Of course, if you're going to have a government and an NSA and a CIA and all the rest of it, you're not going to want, of course it's a terrible idea to let them have phones that are insecure and that have, backdoors from other governments in them. Of course that's a terrible idea, right? But it's even a terrible idea to let the American people, not that I'm like defending the US government, but like, yes, the US government was probably right to not let us buy Huawei phones because then the Chinese government probably had backdoors in the Huawei phones and they're probably surveilling everything you say in phone calls, everything you're saying, even when the phone is supposedly turned off, everywhere you're going online, etc. And thus they have tons and tons and tons of information about, massive segment of the United States population if, if Huawei phones became popular in America, right? So why is this a bad idea? It's a bad idea because it would enable them to completely subvert democracy. Now, how would they do this? Well, they'd be able to tell what everybody is saying about the particular, candidates and what spurs the people to change their minds about the particular candidates and all this kind of thing. They would get tons and tons of inside info, right? Like just like putting a bug, you plant a little surveillance device inside a boardroom, you're going to be able to learn all kinds of things that could help you, short stocks or buy stocks or know who is your enemy, who's trying to get you fired or who's trying to get promoted instead of you and sabotage you. Like information is power, right? So of course China having the power of knowing what the American public is thinking is going to help them with their PR to get America on China's side, to help America, turn America against its own politicians, especially the politicians maybe like Trump who are actually trying to do what is good for America. Not that I think he's doing a great job at that, but he's doing probably a lot better of a job, or at least he's trying to do a better job of it than Obama and Clinton and all the rest of them were back when they were, in power. But my point is, like, information is power, and even if it's just information about the public, and it's not information about, what CIA or NSA is doing or anything like that, if it's just what the average sheeple is doing, the sheeples are the voters, right? And assuming voting is not rigged, which, yes, there's evidence that it is rigged, but I'm not saying it's completely rigged. Plus, we have the, the electoral college system, so even if it is rigged, you got the electoral college thing. So what I'm saying is, it's still a case of like, China would be able to massively benefit if they knew what the American public was thinking because of being able to surveil a huge percentage of the American public because of a huge percentage of the American public having Huawei phones. And even they'd be surveilling all the people who those Huawei phone listeners were around, like, right? Like in a family, if everybody has iPhones, but one person has a Huawei phone, and he leaves it out on the table, that phone, if it's supposedly turned off but is still listening and recording that information and sending it back to China, then that is going to tell China not just what the Huawei phone owner is saying and thinking, it's going to tell the China what everybody else around the phone who's speaking is thinking as well. So, and would tell them what kind of articles to put out, what kind of articles to censor, or what kind of they could create a news organization like RT that's like purely propagandist and is not so much about putting out truth like RT is more about, but not completely about. Like RT rarely talks about the petrodollar, right? They should, but they don't, or at least not from what I've heard. But you will get like a lot of truth on like Kaiser Report, so which is an RT show. Two Americans, husband and wife, Max Kaiser and Stacy Herbert. So you will get a lot of truth on RT, but let's say China wanted to put out a purely propagandist, quote unquote news station for listening by Americans, right? For Americans to view. They could manipulate the public extremely effectively with such a channel if they controlled what the people on that channel were saying, and they did so in accordance with what in response to what the information they were getting from the American public from their Huawei phones surveilling the American public, right? And then that would help shape the propaganda so that they can most effectively manipulate the American public. Even just having Huawei phones in the U.S., if they could listen to the Americans and send that information back to China, would be a huge national security risk because it enabled China to manipulate America extremely effectively. So that kind of blew my mind that Elon Musk could not see that. But then again, at the same time, immediately when I heard him act like it was no big deal if Huawei phones were in America, and even if they were surveilling Americans for the Chinese government. I mean, he didn't say that specifically, but that was the implication in my mind. That's what it seemed to me that they were talking about. If the Chinese government were surveilling us through the Huawei phones, then what's the big deal, right? That seems to be what his opinion was, Elon Musk's, and I'm like, that's retarded. Because number one, what I just said about, the power it would give China over America, but I mean, how could he not see this, right? He's a super smart guy. So either he's one of these geniuses who's also sort of an idiot sometimes, or he's very much one of those people who plays everything close to the vest. And he says only a small fraction of what he actually thinks, right? Maybe he's a propagandist, kind of. He's sort of, in bed with the U.S. government, and he's not going to say anything that's not going to be in favor of the U.S. government, right? But if so, then why wouldn't he agree with the U.S.'s government's decision on the Huawei phones, right? How could he not see that that's, a problem, a huge national security risk to allow Huawei phones to be sold in the U.S.? I mean, either he's an idiot or I don't know what. I mean, how could he not see that, really? It's just so weird to me. Or maybe he just doesn't care about privacy at all. I don't know. But again, how could he not see that that's a national security danger? It was so weird to me. And he kind of had weird gestures and stuff. I thought, what's his name? Chuck Palahniuk, who was recently on Joe Rogan's podcast. I thought he was a little odd. And he even admits he's an odd person, and he's not really a people person, right? Not that I was judging him for being odd. I'm totally accepting of odd people. But it was just very interesting to see Chuck Palahniuk, not. I mean, he was kind of gregarious, but he's not gregarious the way Joe Rogan is, right? So it's almost like I don't know, elite people are often kind of weird, not just in the way they behave, but their personality's a little off or something, especially if they rise up from the bottom, right? Because it's their extreme talent that allows them to rise to the top, as opposed to being part of the Bush family or the Rothschild family or something like that. That's totally different, right? The Rothschilds or the Bushes or something, they might be very gregarious because they're part of this dynastic empire, right? Maybe not dynastic in the Bushes because they haven't been around for 300 years, but you know what I'm saying. So the people who rise from the bottom, middle class or lower class, all the way, up into having millions of dollars, several million, let's say 5, 10, 20 million or something. These people have an extreme talent, right? So often I would think that they'd be a little weird, right? Maybe not so social or whatever, but I think Elon Musk was even weirder than even more sort of oddly antisocial or something, not in an aggressive way, but in a sort of he doesn't really know how to interact with people so well kind of way. I would say he was a little odder than Chuck Palahniuk, although that's a matter of opinion. But Elon Musk would say something and then he'd kind of be quiet. And then Joe Rogan would kind of have to wait, and then he'd say something ask him another question or something, or, Elon Musk would kind of say something and kind of nod in this way, that was very odd. He has this very odd nod that, he's kind of agreeing with himself, or kind of well, not really trying to agree with the other person. It's almost like he's agreeing with himself when he's kind of nodding after he says something, and then he's kind of thinking, or he'll say something, and then he'll just sort of think some more, and then it's kind of disjointed the way he was interacting with Joe Rogan, but it wasn't so bad. It wasn't painful to watch or anything, but it was very interesting to see. So it kind of makes me, him being that thoughtful or something, it sort of makes me think that he is probably one of those people who doesn't say a lot of what he thinks, right? And Joe Rogan said something about something. What was it? And then he sort of said something that seemed to be almost like a brush off. Not that he was saying he didn't want to talk about the subject, but he sort of didn't answer the question, and he said something else, so it was almost and then Joe Rogan didn't push it, so I think Joe Rogan kind of interpreted from that response that, he didn't really want to talk about that. So, that made me think that, he probably does keep a lot of his own thoughts to himself, and what you see and hear from him is really only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Elon Musk, right? But it also shows that Joe Rogan has good people skills in that he picked up on that and was not going to push him on it, right? I think perhaps... maybe worse interviewers are not just less personable and not just less creative in what the questions they ask them, but are also more pushy in what they ask them. They really want to pin them down, right? Even when the interviewee does not want to be pinned down. I think probably worse interviewers are more obsessive about pinning the person down to getting an answer to their question, right? But you know, you're probably not going to get an answer anyway, even if they don't want to answer you really. So it's like, what's the point of pushing in the first place? Because they're not going to really usually answer you even on the second or third time you ask them in a more pointed way. So I found that kind of interesting. What else was interesting about the interview? I mean, I know the whole smoking pot thing immediately became a meme with Elon Musk taking a puff off Joe Rogan's tobacco and marijuana to a cigar that he was smoking. And he did say that he rarely smokes pot. He said he's done it once or twice or a few times or something. It's been a long time since he's done it even once. I think he said he's only done it a few times in his life or whatever, or that was the implication or what I inferred from what he said. But yeah, Elon Musk, I guess he said it's not very, from what he can tell, is not really conducive to being productive, which is very interesting to me because marijuana does have a reputation of inducing apathy in its smokers. Maybe it really depends on your testosterone level, right? Like maybe if you're an intellectual, you don't necessarily have as high of a testosterone level. You know, the whole egghead, the Big Bang Theory guy type of stereotype of an intellectual, like a Elon Musk's type of an intellectual. You don't really think of those kind of guys as being highly aggressive or highly into physical things or high testosterone, right? Like some of them are, I'm sure, but a lot of them are not, I would think. And so maybe if you're a low testosterone guy, smoking pot is going to make you more lethargic, more apathetic, less driven, right? Because, you know, the estrogenic quality of marijuana counteracts, it changes the balance in your testosterone and estrogen, right? But maybe if you're a meathead type of guy like Joe Rogan, even if you're smart, you're a meathead because you have high testosterone, you're into physical things, lifting weights and whatnot. Maybe those people with very high testosterone, it more almost just balances them out, right? Like it creates a more normal balance with their testosterone and estrogen because it sort of increases their estrogen level or, through the false estrogens or whatever, the estrogenic effect of marijuana. And so because of that, it brings such a person like Joe Rogan down to a more normal level, a more calm level that's more like a normal person, right? Whereas if you give a normal person marijuana, it makes them a below average level of aggression and stuff if they're a guy, right? So maybe marijuana is bad for people like Elon Musk because maybe Elon Musk does not have as high of a testosterone level as Joe Rogan, but it's good for Joe Rogan because it mellows Joe Rogan out, right? Because his testosterone level is too high already, you see. So this is what I was kind of thinking about that. He did say it kind of like is bad for his productivity, Elon Musk did. But Joe Rogan has said that smoking pot is actually good for his creativity. I mean, yeah, you maybe a big pothead or something would say that because they're just fooling themselves, right? Like an alcoholic thinking they're not an alcoholic. You're always run into this problem when it comes to drugs. You don't really know how much to trust when it comes to someone talking about the drug and how it affects them, especially if they're a big user of the drug, whether it's alcohol or marijuana or anything else, right? But if they're a small user of it, I think you can trust their opinion on it, right? Like if they just take a puff or two of marijuana, once every 2 or 3 weeks or something. Yeah, I think you can trust someone like that, when they say what its effect on them is and why they do it. So Joe Rogan, he smokes a lot of pot though, so you can't necessarily trust his opinion or his view on how it affects him and whether it makes him more or less creative or whether he needs it to mellow him out or whatever, right? Like, maybe it's affecting him in a negative way, but he's rationalizing or he thinks he's being honest, but he doesn't realize that it's really having a bad effect on him, right? They also did some drinking, too. I think Elon Musk said it is a good scotch or a bourbon or whatever it was that they were drinking, so I think I sort of got the impression that, maybe Elon Musk does drink on a fairly regular basis. Maybe not a lot, just maybe, a drink or two, after work or a drink or two on the weekends, So, but it's interesting how a lot of people, don't smoke pot, but even if they're like not really against it, they don't really smoke it themselves, but they do drink alcohol. It's kind of weird the way that works, although that's maybe a personal thing too, because, alcohol is a stimulant for some people. It makes some people really aggressive, violent even, right? Whereas other people, alcohol just dulls them out. It makes them lethargic and lazy and tired and sleepy. And it's really weird how drugs affect people in different ways like that. Which is really interesting because I don't know if it was maybe on an alt MGTOW video or an article he linked me to, or maybe I saw it somewhere else or read another article or something. But like even other things like antidepressants, right? Antidepressants affect men and women differently. I read something about this. So it's almost like we're being really foolish in giving like men and women the same antidepressants because they can have like the opposite effect on different people, like depending on like I think maybe their hormone levels, or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's their genetics, like how they process the antidepressant. But it can actually have like wildly different effects, like even opposite effects, and not just the normal like a small percentage of people with any drug will have the opposite effect, but like due to gender, certain things like antidepressants can affect different genders radically different. So we really should be designing antidepressants for like different genders, right? Like develop an antidepressant for women and then develop a totally different antidepressant for men. And or we should be analyzing the genes of each person first to see how each antidepressant would affect that individual so that we prescribe them the right antidepressant. So this is kind of something that we should be doing, but which we're not doing. I'm not sure. There might have been one or other two things that I can't remember that I wanted to mention in response to the Elon Musk interview. I definitely recommend it. You should watch it. It's pretty interesting. Elon Musk is obviously clearly a pretty smart guy. He also mentioned really another interesting thing in it. If you're not going to watch the interview, because it is 2 hours and 37 minutes long, he mentioned about how like you can either have flying cars to make like transportation more than two-dimensional, because we're just operating on a flat plane when we're moving people through the city or across the state or whatever, right? Like it's just a flat plane that we're traveling on, the skin of the earth, right? But if you have flying cars, you could have several levels, right? But obviously flying cars, he said it'd be too loud and too much, pressure, pushing down and all kinds of things, right? He also said, like Joe Rogan suggested, we could have magnets, like a magnet road or whatever, and then a magnet on the car or the ship or whatever, and then like that would travel along because you do the opposite magnets so they're repelling. And Elon Musk said you could do that, but it'd be a bad idea. He doesn't recommend it. He recommends you don't do that. I don't think he said why he doesn't recommend it, but he did say he's like has this other third company or fourth company or something where they're like building tunnels under LA so that they can do cars and stuff or something. He was saying like it'd be best if you had like a vacuum tube and magnetics, like magnetic levitation and then a vacuum tube or whatever, right? And you'd shoot these pods almost or whatever, kind of like along the tube, and then you'd get people that way to their destination, and you could make it several levels deep, as many levels deep as you want almost. I mean, he said you could go 10,000 feet down. You could have level after level after level after level. You could have 100 tubes all on top of each other or whatever, right? And so this would enable the traffic problem to be completely solved, right? Because if you have a three-dimensional transportation system, because of it being underground, now it's, forward and left and right. Forward to get to your destination, obviously. Left and right to make sure you could have a lot more people going forward. And then, down as well to make sure you could have even more people going forward. Obviously the downs would be, several levels as well. Left and right. You wouldn't just have a bunch of tubes, one tube and then one tube, one tube. You have maybe 10 or 20 tubes, on the first level, and then another 10 or 20 tubes below that, and then another 10 or 20 tubes below that, and just on and on and on down. But, like you were saying, it'd be super hot down there. So you could only go so deep before it gets too hot. Like they dig gold at like 12,000 feet down, I think, and the walls of the things that they're digging the gold in, the walls of the tunnels or whatever, like 150 degrees or something, which I've heard in other videos, several months ago or a year ago or whatever. So you can only go so deep, right? Because then it gets too hot. But yeah, he was saying he could do that, and he's kind of working on doing at least one or a few tubes or something under LA or whatever, because LA traffic is kind of bad sometimes, I guess. But yeah, he said a lot of interesting things, and you just get to see what kind of person he is. But I don't remember what he's like in the first interview I saw with him, which was a little while ago. I don't know, maybe several months ago, maybe 6 months ago or something, or 9 months ago. I saw an interview with him. And so I don't know if he was really different from that first interview, but he did seem to be, I don't want to say reticent, but like maybe he has a lot going on under the surface. They also talked about niceness and stuff. About like that was another thing I wanted to mention, like niceness, right? They were talking about like most people are fundamentally good. Like he, this is another thing. Like Elon Musk was talking about how most judges are good, right? Like the legal system's actually pretty good. Like most judges are really good and stuff, really smart, and basically implying that they're all fair and blah blah blah. Like this is total BS. He is super rich, right? At least on paper. Elon Musk is. So this is totally crazy, absolutely crazy that he acts like, judges are fair and stuff because, of course they're fair. They seem fair to him because they're fair to him because he's super powerful. When someone is super powerful, everybody treats them with more respect, which is part of the reason that I, made that argument in my video, Feared or Loved. I believe it's on my first channel, Redshift, my main channel. I made the argument that like love and fear are basically synonymous or very closely related, way more than people realize. Because if you want people to treat you with, if you want people to love you, you have to make them fear you. You have to make them respect you. And you make people respect you by having power, right? So when he has power of millions and millions of dollars, he might even be a billionaire, I can't remember, at least on paper, right? So he's really, really rich, right? So he has a ton of power. So having as much power as he does, he could easily be, someone who could cause a lot of trouble for anybody in the government who wanted to mess with him, like a judge or a lawyer or whoever, right? Like, so no one wants to mess with him because he's so rich and powerful and influential and important to society and everything, right? So of course, all the judges are going to treat him well and decide cases in his favor and everything else because, not that they shouldn't have in any particular cases, I'm just saying, like, of course he's going to be getting the deluxe treatment of the legal system, right? He's not going to get screwed over. He's not going to be delayed and just treated badly by the justice system because he's so powerful. They want to give him the best treatment because if all the rich and powerful people were getting treated like the regular people are getting treated in the legal system, all the rich and powerful people would be like, this is bullshit. This is crazy. We are getting treated terribly. If this is what the legal system is like, we got to change this, right? And then the elites would make sure that there's change in the legal system. But I think a lot of the rich people, even if they're worth, 20 million, 50 million, 500 million, whatever, they are, I think, deluded, right? Maybe not the super, super powerful and super, hooked into the system, but those who just have money, and they have a lot of it. I think a lot of these people are just merely deluded about the unfairness of the legal system because they've never been treated unfairly, and no one they know has ever been treated unfairly. And even if they have, all they had to do is bring it to, somebody's attention, some politician or some other judge or lawyer, get a lawyer to change judges and say this judge is being unfair, and then it gets changed and then they're treated fairly from then on. So they never have to go through years and years and years in the legal system being treated like crap and having your rights taken away basically and being totally screwed for years and years and years on end. This never happens to the rich, so they think that the legal system is great. And similarly, in that whole same discussion, I think it was at that same time in the interview, they're talking about like, oh yeah, most people are fundamentally good, right? Like, yeah, of course Joe Rogan and Elon Musk think the regular people are good because they've never been mistreated because everybody wants to kiss their ass because nobody wants to be crucified and or they want to get some favor out of the rich people, right? So everybody treats rich and powerful and really smart and really charming people really well. It's not just that Joe Rogan's a decent guy and he's like, good to people and he treats people with respect, generally speaking. That's not why. It's not that, he's just, this great guy and so he gets treated well so everything goes fine for him. And, if everybody else in society, if you just act like a nice person, you're just fair and decent and honest, well, then you'll be treated just as well as me, Joe Rogan is treated. This is probably what he thinks, right? Joe Rogan and Elon Musk and these people, they probably think that everybody will be treated as well as them if they just act the same way that they act, honorably and kindly and fairly and all the rest of it, right? But no, this is not how it is. Most people get screwed by the legal system and or all kinds of other people, ex-business partners, ex-wives, whoever. And the regular person is getting screwed, especially regular middle-class men, getting absolutely screwed because the justice system is not very fair. Right? Not only have massive rights been taken away from us, with the NSA destroying the Fourth Amendment, utterly annihilating the Fourth Amendment, where it's basically meaningless now, but also, restricting gun rights so far that, like, the Second Amendment, I don't want to say it doesn't exist anymore, but it's been heavily, heavily restricted, even though it clearly says, shall not be infringed, right there in the Second Amendment. That could not be more clear, but it's just, So they think that everybody is treated well if they just, act nicely too. But no, most people do not have money and power, so they're not treated well. So they think that everybody is just a normal person, just a normal, good person, when that's just their experience of life. That's Joe Rogan's experience of life because he's rich and powerful and charming and good looking. That's Elon Musk's experience of life because he's super smart and super rich. That's their experience of life, but that is not the average experience of life. Plus, have they ever has Elon Musk or Joe Rogan or any of these people ever stood on a street corner with a sign trying to protest about something super, super important, like, depleted uranium, baby birth defects? The horrific, horrific, life-ending birth defects of these babies. They look like mutants. They look like they wouldn't live a week because that's how bad their birth defects are. They're just absolutely freakish. These kind of birth defects that happen from depleted uranium exposure because of all the depleted uranium shells we shot off in Iraq and stuff. Because of this, you hold up a sign trying to tell people about this, and no one cares. No one cares. You hold up a sign saying "Stop ignoring genocide." No one freaking cares. Like 1 to 2, maybe 5% at most, but probably only 1 or 2% of the people who drive by read your sign and give you a thumbs up, like, yep, that's an important thing. I'm glad you're out here trying to wake people up about it. Everybody else just looks at your sign or doesn't even look, but a lot of them look at the sign and then they just turn their head. They don't even care. They don't care at all. These sheeple do not care about millions of deaths. They do not care about the most horrific things going on every single day. These sheeple who ignore genocide are worthy of death. The sheeple deserve extermination, mass annihilation, and if the elites were not such baby-raping monsters, I would be completely on their side in exterminating, 95% of the population. Because 95% of the population has no conscience, no soul, they don't care about the most horrific things going on. As long as it's going on somewhere else in the world and they don't care, and it doesn't affect them, then they don't care about it. And that is the average American sheeple. So when Elon Musk and Joe Rogan are saying that, oh, most people are fundamentally good. Yeah, no. Most people are not fundamentally good. Most people are fundamentally scum, right? Like maybe if they had been raised by good parents, and maybe if they had been raised in a decent culture like it is in some other countries that are not as powerful and corrupt as America is, yeah, then maybe those people would have been decent people. But no, they're not decent people. Not in the West, not in America. These people are totally corrupt, totally apathetic in the face of the most horrific genocide, and they deserve to die. And thus, that was another thing that Joe Rogan and Elon Musk were highly deluded, highly mistaken about. Just typical, living in your ivory tower kind of delusion, right? Like, this is what happens when you gain wealth and power and status and influence and you roll in these, upper crust circles. You get completely deluded about life and about regular people and about what, the justice system and the government are really like and all the rest of it, right? Like, that was another thing. Elon Musk is basically like advocating for, restriction of artificial intelligence because it could prove he said once it's here, like true artificial intelligence, it'll be completely out of our control. And that's true. But he was basically saying we gotta, have some kind of, it would be nice if we had some kind of regulatory things, some kind of things before we do oversight or whatever, we have insight. Like we figure out about it and before artificial intelligence arrives, we find ways to limit it so that it will not exterminate us or whatever. And I sort of understand where he's coming from because, yeah, extermination of the human race is not a good thing, right? Like, even government is not quite that evil, right? Even though government's almost that evil. Or at least the New World Order types are, right? Because they want to exterminate 7 billion people like they implied on the Georgia Guidestones. But when they said they want to get the population down to 500 million, of course that's going to be done by force. It couldn't be done any other way. I mean, look at how ineffective the one-child policy was, right? Like, there is no way to stop human reproduction. The drive is just too strong. So getting the population down to 500 million would almost certainly have to be done by way of mass extermination of people and or genetically engineering people to where only certain people can procreate. Only a small percentage of the population can procreate, right? So as to lower the population. That might be another way it could be done. So it's not necessarily advocating genocide, but considering most of the elites are psychopaths, I do think the Georgia Guidestones are intimating genocide, of most of the population. With 95, 97% or whatever it is, that 96% of, 7 billion people, I think is something like I think it's 93% of the population. Yeah. So they want to probably exterminate 93% of the population. But yeah, so he was basically advocating, we need government oversight or whatever. Although he was admitting that, fatalistically, he said he fatalistically now accepts that, he said he was warning people for years, Elon Musk did, about artificial intelligence. But now he says people just don't seem to care. They're just, charging forward like, it's coming and nobody seems to care. Like nobody's worried. And he seems to be worried, but he's almost worried about the fact that no one else is worried, and it's going to arrive without us, realizing what we're doing, and then it'll take over, and then maybe it'll take, like he said at one point in the interview, he said, it could be really bad, it could be really good. That's exactly how I look at it. Like artificial intelligence could be really, really bad. I'm talking like the extermination of every living thing on Earth, and not out of malice, but just out of like, AI's like, okay, these are some little ant creatures, roaming the Earth. But I have a better plan. I'm gonna recreate the whole Earth in like, a technological way, so that I can create more artificial intelligence and expand my own intelligence. So I'm just gonna, exterminate all these little life forms that are kind of in my way, and then I'm gonna, create the world how I want it to be. Right, so it wouldn't even necessarily have to have any malice toward us. It just, mows us over like we roll over, ants when we're driving our car. We don't think about the ants we might be rolling over in our driveway and killing when we back the car out of the driveway to go to work for the day, right? So same way, artificial intelligence could just exterminate us without even really thinking about it, in just doing its own plans that it has for the world, right? So yeah, maybe AI exterminates the world. Not the world, but human civilization, all animals, etc. Exterminates all human beings, till there's only artificial intelligent life on the planet Earth, right? That could happen, or it could decide to create a utopia for us, right? And or sort of join us to it, perhaps in certain ways. Obviously, it would be limited in the way we could interact with it, right? But it could, try to make paradise for us. So, just like Elon Musk said, it could be really, really good when artificial intelligence, true artificial intelligence that gets out of our control immediately. That could be really, really good for humanity, or it could be really, really bad. It could be either one, and nobody knows. So, we're probably going to find out, though, assuming we, get onto solar energy and all the rest of it and don't have a massive economic, social collapse to where we can't even recover from it because there's hardly any oil left, I guess we're going to see, right? But, you can watch the interview for yourself. I summed up, I think, a fair amount of it and gave my criticisms and whatnot. But this is the end of this video. Hit the thumbs up button if you liked it. Hit the thumbs down button if you did not like this video. Peace trucks.